Alright, good afternoon everybody. Good afternoon Facebook, Phoenix Fruit Growers, and good afternoon YouTube. So I've been meaning to make this video for a long time. I'm sorry I haven't gotten it out there, but finally here it is. So today we are going to be talking about feeding. Okay, so this is going to be year of the feeding. We're going to feed all of our fruit trees this year, and we're going to feed all of our fruiting plants and our vegetable gardens. So last year was year of the watering, so I think I got everybody to increase their water use a little bit on these plants to get the optimum health back on these plants. But today we are going to be talking about feeding. So I've got all my accoutrements here, and we'll kind of go, I'm going to make this probably a four-part video, and we're going to talk in the first one about compost feeding, the second one we're going to talk about granular feeding, the third one will be liquid feeding, and then the fourth one will be foliar feeding. But I think it's very, very important to feed our trees here, especially if they've been neglected. Like if you've gotten an older property and you've kind of taken on some foster fruit trees, well then those probably have been neglected for quite a while, so those really do need addressed. And so we're going to feed the trees here, which I feed all the time anyway. So you'll see the health on these trees is very, very good. But if you've got some trees that are in poor health, or you see some nutrient deficiencies in those plants, well then you need to start feeding those plants. So we are going to go over the different methods here of feeding, and we're going to, like I said, I think we're going to start here with compost feeding. Now the reason I have these 3 bags out here is these are the 3 composts that I make. So the green bag down here is the orchard compost, and this is for planting fruit trees in the ground, or berry bushes, whatnot. So this is made to be used 50% this compost and then 50% native soil. Then the orange bag is a raised bed soil or a potting soil or a gardening soil, and this soil is used anywhere that the items contain, where it's not going to have a transfer with the earth and the nutrients and the water and the microbes with the earth. It's more or less a self-sufficient community in this bag. And then the yellow bag is the Aztec Gold, so this is the one that I use as a feeding. And so what this does is this feeds the soil life that is in this bag, and it also feeds the soil life that is in this bag. So this is meant to be used as a top dressing, and we're going to talk about how many times a year you should be feeding these plants. 3 times a year is your bare minimum, okay? And those months are going to be February, May, and September. Those are the months that if you're going to just do it those months, make sure you do a nice heavy feeding those 3 months. But I'm going to show you an alternative way of doing that, and I feed monthly from February to September and sometimes up to November. But I cut the amount way back. So if you were going to do, say, 3 times a year and you were going to use this full bag, well, if you were going to do it, if you're going to do 1 bag each of the feeding periods, then if you were going to do it monthly, you would just split this bag into a third and toss it around the tree, around the drip line, and I'll show you guys exactly how I do that too. So these are the different composts that I make. Use whatever you feel comfortable using. Just get some organics in the yard, because the organics is where you're going to have the success. Because we're trying to feed the soil and the soil life here. We're not trying to feed the tree. We're going to let the soil life feed the tree. So we're in essence just correcting the soil and feeding the soil because we want nice healthy soil. And you guys have seen from my previous videos on this property, the soil that I have here is it's pretty amazing, but I've been working on it for quite a while. And it's more or less just a huge sandwich of mulch, of wood chips, and compost. Wood chips, compost, wood chips, compost. And I more or less make this sandwich in the yard, which holds an incredible amount of moisture and humidity. And it also is a nice breeding ground for all the soil microbes that we're wanting in the soil, because we want really, really healthy soil. So I think we're going to start over here on one of the orange trees, but I'm going to try to just pick a couple of different trees on the property, and we're going to feed those in different ways so that you guys can kind of see how I do them. And then of course use your own methods, but no matter what, it's year of the feeding, guys, so make sure you get something done this year, and we're coming up on the feeding time. So you want to try to feed around Valentine's Day this year. Now with this warm winter, this is kind of throwing us off, guys, so everything is out of sync. Everything is out of whack. Things are blooming when they're not supposed to be. Things haven't gone dormant that are supposed to have gone dormant. And so it's kind of a mess this year. So I guess we'll see what we get as far as food production goes. So we're going to start over here on one of these trees, so I'll just pause it for a little bit and just walk in between the different trees here. Alright, so we're going to start over here on this blood orange. And this is a blood orange tree. This is a Moro blood orange. And I got this tree more than likely at Lowe's. I think this tree is going on about 3 years old now. And you can see the size that this tree has achieved in just that time period. And I believe this was a dwarf. So he is already, my reach is about 8 feet. So he's probably 12 feet. So he's grown 12 feet within that last 3 years. And he's fruiting. I mean, you can see some of the blood oranges up there at the top, and they just have a wonderful, wonderful color. I mean, those are magenta. Those are red. Those are really, really pretty. I don't know if you can see those, but. And then if you look at the health of the tree, I mean, this tree is just amazing. Like, this is how you want your citrus to look. And it's not too hard to achieve this. It's just more or less a lot of food and a lot of water. These things are heavy, heavy feeders. But you see the brilliance of these leaves. I mean, these things are just absolutely perfect. There's no salt burn on these at all, because the compost takes care of your salt for you. So you see the color and the shape of that leaf is just absolutely perfect. So this is how you want your citrus to look. So this is the first one that we're going to start with. And so I've got some of my Aztec Gold poured out here in this bin so you can kind of see the consistency of it. So this is double composted, so this is extremely fine material, and this is nearing humus, and once it gets put down on the ground and packed together, it pretty much becomes humus. It becomes that nice humus sponge, which holds in all those microbes and holds all that extra water and nutrients for the tree. And this system is kind of based on having some type of a compost that's got the soil life already in it. So to kind of go back on that a little bit, this is more or less to spark extreme fruiting and get these things going and green them up really, really fast. I use the Orchard Gold too, and first, and that's recommended. I mean, that's how I do that first. So assuming that you've already got either planted it with that Orchard Gold or some type of a compost, a living compost, or if you don't, like let's say it's an older tree like an old orange and it's just more or less bare mud underneath that tree, well then you'd want to put down a layer of a living compost first before you start to put the feedy compost to the living compost to feed the microbes that are in that living compost, if that makes sense. So this is the feeder. This is going to kick these guys into high gear, and I've already got the soil life in the soil, so I'm more or less feeding those guys. So this is a very, very simple process, and I'm going to show you that on this orange here. So I've got all this, I've got the mulch down here. I've got it much, much heavier out here towards the berm. But I'm going to hit the drip line of the tree, which is going to be approximately out in this foot area, and then it's a band that goes around the entire tree. So I'm going to pull back my mulch here. I've got it really thin in the water well. You can see down in here it's not very thick before we actually get to the compost layer. There's our compost layer. And then up in here, it's really thick. This is really, really heavy wood chipped here. So we're gonna focus on that drip line area. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull back the wood chips. And I'm just gonna pile them up on the berm for now. And I'm just gonna do the front half of this, guys, so I don't bore you with the whole thing, but you see how easy that is. That took about 20 seconds. So now I'm gonna take the Aztec, or a feeding compost per se, and I'm just gonna pour this in here on the drip line, just like that. Okay, I'm gonna take and spread it. Real thin down by the trunk of the tree, don't come up on the trunk. Bring this out here. Spread it nice and smooth. Then I'm going to take my wood chips and I'm just going to toss them right back in. Just like that. And it doesn't have to go all the way to the trunk of the tree, because don't worry, the birds will do that. The birds digging around in your yard will do that, whether you have chickens or just wild birds. So I want it to end up looking about like this when I'm done. So I've got my heavy wood chips out here on the berm again, and I've got the thin layer flowing back down on top of my compost. So let me grab the hose real quick, and I'm gonna water this in. I'm gonna settle this in so it can start to work like it's supposed to. But that's about how it should look, and that's how it should look under a citrus tree. So you see that nice heavy mulch, that nice black compost. Now I'm gonna grab the hose real quick. Pause me real quick. All right, so now I'm just gonna come back in and water this down. I want to get that berm wet again. And I want to get that nice and moist on the compost that I've just put in there. And then I'm going to set the hose here in the middle. Now I'm just going to let this slowly fill up. Because if I keep watering like that, all that new material is just going to slide down to the trunk, and I don't want it to do that. I want it to permeate into the earth and into the mulch, the wood chips. So I'm just going to fill it up slowly like this. And then see, you'll also have that nice black, rich water. That's pretty much your compost tea. That's pretty much the first initial feeding right away. Get the microbes going. So as this starts to fill up, it'll start to get that wet, and it'll actually keep it in place. And then as it starts to fill, it'll get to the top of the berm, and then I'll just shut the water off, and then that'll be its feeding for the year. So I mean, or for the season. This one wouldn't be fed again until May, and it would be fed in the exact fashion that I just did this one. So it's really, really simple to compost feed, and this is the most organic way to do it. This is going to give you the best results. It's a lot slower at first, but then as the stuff starts to break down, then your production really speeds up at that point as everything starts to break down. So we'll go ahead and let this guy fill up. And that's probably pretty good for now. I'm going to rinse him down because these leaves get dusty on these citrus trees, and then they don't photosynthesize well. It kind of clogs up their radar dishes. Since it's nice and cool today, I'm just going to go ahead and give him a bath, rinse him down, and then what you're also doing is you're more or less putting natural azomite down, because that's how a tree in fact feeds itself. All that dust collects on the leaves, and then every time it rains, which it doesn't rain here, but if it did, in theory, all that dust, those fine micron nutrients, can just go right down to the base of the tree. And so in essence, he feeds himself by doing that, and by the leaf drop. If this was a deciduous tree, this is an evergreen, so he doesn't feed himself very fast in that fashion. But all the citrus, all the extra citrus that falls, I also leave that and put that back in the well, because that's going to break down and feed him those same nutrients so that he can make those same fruits for you next year even better. So you don't want to rob everything away from the tree. You want to let some of his leaves fall back down, and you want to let some of his fruit fall back down. So now this guy is done, and you can see how happy he is. He's had his spring feeding and watering, and now he's good to go. So now I'm gonna pick a different tree, different situation, so we can address it a little different way here. All right, everybody. So this time we're going to do some compost on this mango tree. So I've got this mango tree in the front yard, and I've got 3 dwarf Barbados cherries planted down here at the base of this tree, so they'll kind of fill in the bottom section of the tree, and then of course I'll have the mango up above. But this is a little bit of a different feeding situation, because on this tree I've got these concrete tree rings. Okay, so this is actually kind of ideal because it's going to lock all those nutrients in there, And this is best for like a flood irrigation system. If you've got flood irrigation, well, if you've got a berm system like that, like the other tree we just talked about, and the wood chips, well, every time it floods, it's going to wash a certain degree of at least the berm away. The wood chips will lock together, so we're not as concerned about those. As the fungus starts to develop in the wood chips, it more or less makes just like a giant cake, a giant pancake. So once that's been kind of layered and glued together, it doesn't float away anymore. But if you've got flood irrigation and you want to keep the nutrients in now and keep those from washing away, this is really ideal, is to do these tree rings. And what's nice about these tree rings is these are a nice 4-foot diameter ring, so these contain a pretty good sized tree. This size or larger. I've got this papaya in one. I just put this avocado over here in one. And most of the ones over here on this side have them. This orange tree, this navel to the side of me. And look at the color of the fruit on these guys this year. You guys, I mean, that's just absurd. The color is just amazing. Look at that. Just wonderful, wonderful fruit. And green. Look at this tree. He's just as happy. He's a little dusty too, see? See all that dust I'm wiping off? That's what I was talking about, those little solar panels. So once you clean those guys up, then he can produce way better. I mean, you can see I can almost shine that leaf as compared to the other ones. So anyway, back to this. Okay, so now we've got this well here, so this is just as easy. We're going to pour our compost in, and then we're just going to have to kind of weave it around the plants, and we're going to keep the majority of it to the back of the berm here, because like I said, remember, it's going to wash into the front eventually anyway, and you don't want it all to do that. We want to keep it kind of out here on this drip line. So I'm going to put some around the cherries here. And then I'm going to keep the majority of it to the back. And so you're more or less refreshing your compost, because you see how beat down that it starts to get, right? The wood chips breaks down, the soil breaks down, and it just needs a good refreshing, more or less. So that's what we're doing here. So you see the way this looks kind of before. Well, let's get all the compost in there. You'll see how awesome it looks again. On this, I'm going to go right over whatever wood chips are left in there. Like so. Some of that extra. Okay, and that is pretty much, that's it. She's refreshed. I might clean out some of these pine needles, make it look a little better. But other than that, this one's good to go. So I'm going to grab the hose. Same thing. If this had flowers on it, I would not do that, because you'd slough that pollen off of these mangoes. But he has not quite flowered yet, so he's getting a bath today. So yeah, just like that, and then you just put this on low. Set it right in the middle. Let that one slowly fill up. Okay, so there's that one. All right, so now let's talk about if you were going to feed every month versus feeding the 3 times a year. Okay, so you saw the approximate amount that I put on that tree. In terms of the bags, the sand bags that I was showing you earlier, it's probably roughly 3/4 of that bag to feed that tree. So if I'm going to cut it, I'm going to do it monthly. Here's how easy it is to do that one. So I'm going to do that on this avocado tree that I planted also out here in the front yard. So I'm going to do this one monthly. So I'm not going to put on that same amount that I just showed you here. I mean, this is just super simple. I'm just going to take a couple handfuls. You just throw it in there like that, I'm done. Pretty much that simple. Then next month it would get a couple more handfuls. And then the next month a couple more handfuls. So once I get this watered in today, I'm going to put the wood chips back in. Nice black soup. See how I'm just easily going around and kind of stirring that in. Until we have that just super black soup. Super black water. You want the water when you're watering the trees to be either black, either this color, or you want it to be clear. Like you don't want it to, here's some native dirt. You don't want it to be the color of dirt. See that brown water? You don't want it to be that brown color of the dirt. Well, this is still mixed. I don't even know if I have any real native soil anymore. There's some, maybe. Okay, you see that color? That's the color you don't want it to be. The color of the dirt. Because what you're doing, in essence, is you're washing those really fine clay particles down into the root system every time you do that. And you do it again, 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 and then you end up eventually plugging up that root system because you've washed the finest, basically the finest particles, the finest silt down into the root system. So you don't want that to happen. So you want to see either nice black, which you would be getting in a compost situation like this, or you want it to be clear, which is what you're going to get in something that's already been composted and then it's got wood chips over it. So like if I stuck it over here in this papaya, when this fills up, it's going to be clear because a lot of those nutrients have already washed down. But then this avocado, he's pretty much ready to go again, so I'm going to remulch him. And I'm pretty sure that Ice Cream Man was in our last video, or has been in at least a couple of my videos. So, I guess we picked perfect timing with him every time. All right, so now we're gonna take the wood chips. I've got some around here I'm just gonna randomly grab. And I'm gonna put them back in the well. The majority being towards that outer ring. The theoretical drip line, I know this tree isn't big enough to have the drip line out here yet, but I still want it nice and thick out here on that edge. Because the more and more I water and the more birds get into this, they're going to pull all that down into there anyway. So I'll just let them do the work for me. So there we go. That one is pretty much ready to go. So that's by doing it monthly, just a really very small amount, larger amount on the ones that you're going to do 3 times a year. I find that it works better to do it monthly because I find it's like a consistency thing. They like to eat it. Think about them eating every day, even though you're feeding them monthly. So you like to eat every day, they like to eat every day. And if you get them on kind of that locked in pattern, then they know what to expect. And they more or less, they'll turn on their grow gene, and then they don't stop growing. They don't have a reason to stop growing because you've given them plenty of food, plenty of nutrition, plenty of water, and it's very, very consistent. So if you're doing your watering, like let's say you're doing your watering once every 3 days, we'll keep it on that once every 3 days because you get them used to that, and then they know what to expect, and then they don't turn off their growing. When you water them randomly, like once every 14 days, and then once every 10 days, then once every 3 days, it throws them off. It throws them way off, and they just want that consistency just like we do. So they think about them eating every day and drinking every day, even though you're not going to be doing it that often. But think about yourself and compare yourself to these plants, especially these fruiting plants. So yeah, we just definitely want to feed our plants this year, and that's pretty much it on the compost component as far as the feeding goes. There's some older videos where I talk about the actual compost and the ingredients in it and how I use it on these plants and trees and how I get them to thrive like this. But the basic principles are the food, water, and the shelter. And if you can nail those three on any given plant, then you've got it. So for instance, watering, we know that they need consistent watering. So just get them on some type of a schedule. They don't all have to be on the same schedule. Citrus are going to be different than stone fruits, are going to be different than tropical. So they're all going to be on a little bit of a different watering schedule. Just get them consistent. And then feeding, get your feeding consistent, and you'll have excellent results with these guys. Because remember, all the flavors, all the flavonoids and all the minerals and all the health that comes out of these plants and this fruit is in the fruit. And if you don't give it to them, well, then they're not going to be able to just pull that out of the air in most cases. So make sure you feed these for optimal health. And they won't stress out, and they won't get such bad diseases if you keep them healthy, because there's been rampant disease this year, especially with canker on stone fruits. It's been horrific. And a lot of that's just due to stress. They weren't fed, they weren't watered, they weren't taken care of. And when they're put in that situation, well, then they're more likely to get diseases. So if you want to keep everything nice and healthy and green like this, well, then that's pretty much what you have to do. And then the third component is shelter. So you just have to pick a good spot for them. Like I wouldn't put this avocado tree out here at the road. I'm going to put it in this nice little microclimate that I've already built, where I've got this orange tree next to me, the papaya, mango, got a huge mosquito up above me, pear tree behind me, another mango, grapevines before it ever even reaches the road. And then it just shells it in. So if you could just nail those three components, you're in there. And the most important thing for this month is your feeding, because this is the most important month to feed these trees, because this starts their fruit cycle. And if you don't give them that nutrition right now, then by the time you do the May feeding, it's often too late, because most of your fruit have already set, and you've probably actually eaten a lot of the fruits, like loquats. They're already gone. So that feeding is more or less to keep them thriving through the summertime. And then the fall feeding is more or less just to get them ready for winter. And then I've noticed that by feeding them even later, like into November, that when they come into their fall feeding, they've already been fed, because it takes about 21 days for a plant to react to a feeding, whether it be a compost feeding or whether it be a granular or a liquid or any of those. It takes about 21 days for it to fully react. So there's that reaction time, that buffer time. You got to remember that. That's why often you don't see winter damage till way after the fact. Like 2 weeks later after a freeze, you're thinking, oh wow, my guavas, they just cruise through that, no problem. And then 2 weeks later, they're brown and they're crunchy and they're dry. So yeah, it's just more or less a matter of hitting those things, guys. So that's going to be it on the first part of this video. So that's compost feeding. And the next video we'll do is probably the granular feeding, and then we'll kind of keep them posted after that. All right, guys, thank you for watching, and remember, keep feeding.